Ooh, is that good?
Yeah.
Yum, 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 yum.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I prefer salad because I'm a triceratops. What are you?
I'm a dinosaur.
You're a dinosaur?
And I think the world sings.
Wow.
Roar!
Oh, there's a Ameliasaurus over here. Where is she? Ah! Ah! Here she is.
I smashed her away. Now. I smashed her away from you.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Cliff, and this is Life with Multiple Sclerosis. Today's topic is really awesome because it is about being a parent with multiple sclerosis. If you are a parent with multiple sclerosis, stay tuned because you could probably add to the conversation or learn something. If you're thinking about becoming a parent and you have multiple sclerosis, the next few minutes of this video are going to basically be your go-to survival set. My name is Cliff again, and this is Life with MS. Let's go. Okay, few things in life are more difficult than being a parent, and few things in life are more rewarding. I absolutely love being a father. However, I was diagnosed with my multiple sclerosis after we had our child, Gavin. Gavin is almost 8. He'll be 8 this month. And the last 8 years have been really, really challenging and super fun. And if I could go back and tell myself what I would do different and give myself some instructions on trying to raise a child, not only while having multiple sclerosis in a very aggressive form of it, I have summed it all up here, and I'm going to give you the tips that helped me adapt and survive. And I should say, really helped us adapt and survive. So, number one, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm just a bald dude on YouTube with MS and a family making it work. And it has been a journey of discovery. So let's get back to it. Number one, prioritize energy conservation and do strategic planning. What do I mean by this? Well, okay, so we know fatigue is bad. And I have to tell you, when I was diagnosed in Texas. Texas is known for being extremely hot, and my fatigue there was bonkers off the wall. So I really had to plan around dealing with my fatigue and trying to raise my child. Now, at the time, he was between 2 and 3 years old and 4 years old. He had a stupid amount of energy. Blast off! Whoa! Wow, that was awesome! Woo! Oh, it never gets old. It's like the 10th time. And the heat there was absolutely killing me. And what I discovered was to basically think about the day ahead and plan ahead to figure out what I could do to help stimulate him and at the same time not completely kill me, because by about noon or 1 o'clock in the evening or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, feels like the evening sometimes, I would just completely drop off in my energy. And my child was never the kind of kid to nap. He would just never do that. From age 18 months on, napping was just not a thing he did. And that was brutally tough. Because I always used to think, oh, if he just takes a nap, I can actually get some downtime and recover from my MS fatigue. Never happened. And at the time, I didn't know about all the great little drugs and things you could do with MS to help boost your energy. And maybe that was a positive, maybe that was a negative. I don't know. But the way I made it work was by thinking about the days ahead and basically writing out a schedule and trying to figure out how I was going to get through the next day with my kid. There are a few things to keep in mind with this. I had to think about activities we could do that we could do inside. Doing a good job, bud. That's okay. Now, they say in Texas there are 2 seasons. There's summer and football. That's about as accurate as I could possibly describe it. It just never really cools down. You may get some freak storms here and there where it ices over for a couple of weeks and causes total chaos. All right, anybody for a drive down our street? I say no. And that happened to us. But for the most part, It is hot. It is super hot. And with MS, it is absolutely miserable. And I got to say, I love Texas. There's a lot to love about Texas, but the heat with this disease is just not fun at all. So planning for things like going to the library with a kid, and you may think it like maybe a year old or 2 years old or 3 years old, they won't be interested in the library at all. But actually, I found that not to be true. While our library in our little town was incredibly small, they had put together lots of children's programs. And so you could go there and sometimes see mommy groups, which was always totally awkward for me because I was like the dad that was like lingering around the moms. And it was, I don't know, I was never accepted, even though I was just there to help out, raise my child. Uh, but they always made me feel awkward. Maybe that was just me. I'm not sure. However, I kept going, and Gavin really blossomed in that environment because he got to hang out with other kids. We got to read stories to the kids. We got to have fun. We got to do coloring. We did all that stuff. So, libraries are a godsend for parents that are trying to raise their kids with MS because it's an indoor environment. There is some air conditioning, whether it be too hot outside or it be too cold outside. It's awesome. And also, I find that libraries, and I've been to a lot of them, are pretty lenient with kids. They don't really mind if they're playing around, screaming, running around a little bit. You know, you can't get away with total chaos, but usually there's a dedicated section for kids. And that became like just a lifesaver in a lot of ways. Now, I also mentioned the children's museums. Luckily, we were in Austin. They have a fantastic children's museum there. They also have those here in North Carolina. And those were awesome, mainly because lots of people would show up and have fun. They can get a little expensive. Memberships are key with those if you're going to go a lot. Um, However, the kids kind of get bored of them over time. So making sure you line yourself up with other people that are going is going to be absolutely critical to the success long term with children's museums, because then your kid gets to hang out with other kids and they get to do kid things. Well, the parents get to take a little break and actually talk about things other than kid things, which somehow always seems to turn back into talking about kid things. I guess that's all we do as parents is we talk about kid things. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so libraries, children's museums, uh, pools, recreation centers are fantastic.
You got it. Good job, bud. Good job.
These are all things that work with our MS because you can go just hang out in a pool. Now, this is where I'm a little sketchy on the pool idea because there were days where like I just had enough energy to get in the pool and I didn't feel responsible as an adult taking my kid to a pool by myself, a pool without lifeguards, like an HOA pool. Um, and knowing that like my fatigue was bad enough that maybe I would zone out and I would not pay enough attention to what was going on with Gavin. So that's something to be mindful of. Like I had to be aware of my state of energy before taking Gavin out swimming because really his life depended on it. He was just learning how to swim, and I had to be very careful about how much energy I was spending and to be sure I was 100% focused on him, which, if you have kids, you know, is very draining in itself, even without multiple sclerosis. To have kids at a pool is just kind of like organized chaos in some way. And it's dangerous if it's not managed correctly. So that's another thing you can do that helps with the MS slightly, especially on the super hot days. So think about the energy conservation. Like, what activities can you and your kid do where you don't have to expend a ton of energy that will keep the kid busy at the same time? So, parks are great if it's not too hot outside. Also, we had these parks splash pads in Texas, which were awesome, which were basically just fountains shooting up stuff all over the place. Let's recap point number one: energy conservation for you and energy expenditure for the kid. All right, let's move on to point number two: fostering an open communication and age appropriate education for your kid. This became a major challenge for me because Gavin has a super high amount of energy, but he is also incredibly vocal and has been since about 2 years old, maybe a year and a half. He picked up language very early on We never baby talked with them. He was stuck with his engineer and marketing parents in a bubble during the pandemic because he couldn't go out and play with other kids because I was on disease modifying therapy. At the time, we didn't know what COVID was doing to people with MS, so we couldn't take the risk of having Gavin pick up something and spread it to me, and we didn't know what COVID was doing to kids. It was very early on in the COVID game. We just happened to be stuck right there in the middle. And we had to come up with a way to communicate with them that, daddy is just too tired today to do this. And at the age of 2, 2.5, that wasn't really a viable option. He just didn't understand that daddy was a little bit different than other people's parents in terms of his energy level and how much I could do with him. And so what we ended up doing is we came up with a lot of toys and ideas that we could do inside, and I could kind of walk him through what was going on with me. And one example that really worked out well with me is one day he woke up and his arm was totally numb because he had slept on it. And he was freaking out. It was probably his first time a limb has ever fallen asleep from lack of circulation. And he's like, oh, my arm, my arm, my arm, my arm. And the next day, I had a really bad flare up and I couldn't feel my legs. And we were going to go to the park that day. And my legs were completely numb. And Gavin kept bugging me, let's go to the park, let's go to the park, let's go to the park. And I said, Gavin, I really can't walk today. And he says, Dad, just push through it. In his 2-year-old mind, I could just push through it. I said, that's not how it works. I said, remember yesterday when your arm fell asleep and you couldn't feel your arm or move your arm? And he goes, yes. I said, that's what I'm experiencing today with my legs. But it's not going to go away in just 20 or 30 minutes. It might take the whole day. And I had to go over it a few times with him, but finding something that was an example that he could understand was awesome. I also did it with optic neuritis. I put on a little pirate patch he had on one of his eyes on one day when I was having really bad optic neuritis from the heat outside. So I said, you're going to be like me today. You're going to wear a pirate patch. And he put a pirate patch on, and we did things that we could both do together with one eye. And he thought it was super fun playtime and it was super challenging. And he was crashing in the walls and I was crashing in the walls, but we were relating on a symptom level. So he got to really kind of step into my very large shoes at the time and kind of get a perspective, no pun intended, on what I was seeing with my vision that day. And I only had to do that once. And I think he was maybe 3 years old. And he was like, wow, that's kind of messed up that you can't just like open your eye. And I said, well, my eye's open. I just can't see anything out of that eye today, but it's going to get better. And so he got to experience optic neuritis in a pirate kind of way. It was kind of a fun way to explore that with him. So my recommendation is the best results I had with explaining my situation to a very young child was help them understand by giving them the experience. Like, what is it about your MS that you can duplicate easily and let them experience? And I found that he, because of these experiences and because of these examples I gave him, he's become like this like 7-year-old, just super empathetic, compassionate, fantastic, amazing child who really, like, when he sees somebody walking down the street with a walker or a cane or something, he says, maybe they have MS or maybe they have this, or like, can we help them? He wants to run up and ask them if they can be helped, because he's learned that just being around me. When I was first diagnosed, I was using a walker, and he would go and get my walker. It was 6 times his size, but he'd come pushing it out of the bedroom or the closet or wherever I had it. He'd say, Dad, you need this right now. You need to be using this. And so that was really cool. And then I would stoop it down a little bit and I would make him a little walker and I'd make him a little cane, and he could try it all. And he could see what it was like to feel like me for 10 minutes or 10 seconds. It didn't really matter, but he really grasped and embraced that. So that was cool. Okay. So communication takes many forms. Maybe it's not verbal. Maybe it's showing them how we are experiencing our disease. In my case, it started off with that very tangible way of doing it. And now it's a very verbal way. He totally gets it. We understand each other. And now we don't even really have to like talk about it. I can just tell him, you and Mom are going to the water park today. I'm not going to do that because that's not going to end well for me. And he's totally cool with it. He gets it. He misses me when he does that, but and they all miss me, and I really miss them. But we all know if I went along, we'd all be miserable because I would be super miserable and the next day would be even worse. And so by just stepping out of the arena for a little while, letting them do their thing, they get to have their fun. And it's just an understanding that it's just better for everybody. Point number three, I cannot emphasize enough, is build a strong support network and seek community. Now, Andrea and I had just moved to Texas when Gavin was born. He was only about 6 months old or 7 months old. So we didn't really have a network. And I have to say, the best way to make friends that I've ever discovered in my life is not by talking about careers, and that's not by talking about illnesses or chronic conditions or any of that stuff. It's by having a dog.
Okay, Amelia, up the stairs. Up the stairs. Up the stairs. Down this tube. Good girl. Back up the stairs. Up the stairs. Across the bridge. Down the slide. Yeah, good job, girl. What do you think, bud? Oh, I don't know. It's a rock. Oh, that's cool. I love that. Good find.
Here you go.
And having a kid, because nothing brings community together better than a dog and a kid. Everybody enjoys kids. Everybody enjoys dogs for the most part. I have one neighbor, not too fond of dogs, but likes my kid. So that's a score, right? By taking the dog and the kid out all the time, we fostered a community around us and built really great relationships. And we took that knowledge when we moved to North Carolina, and we managed to ramp up our community quickly. Of course, school will do that too. But if the kid is at an age where school is not a thing yet, maybe it's before kindergarten or it's before preschool, any of that stuff, and you're not part of a church or something, I can't communicate enough how super important it is to get out there and start making connections, because you will have to rely on your community at some point to help with your child. They say it takes a village to raise a child. That is absolutely true. And I think most people just absolutely love to be part of that community. And I have to say, both in Texas and here in North Carolina, we have a fantastic community that I trust 100%. Gavin has a bazillion friends. They have great parents. Get out there, make friends. You don't have to make them your best friends, but you guys will relate on a level of being parents that people without kids will never understand. And I say that because my mom used to say, you need to have kids. You just don't get it. You don't get it. And I'm like, yeah, I do get it. I have freedom. But after we had Gavin, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like, kids are so cool. There's so much fun. There's so much work, and things are so difficult sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's the best thing that ever happened to me and my wife. We just absolutely love it. Gavin is just the coolest, and it's so fun to have all his friends come over, and they just are partying and they're just being kids, and it's the best. And for all the stress it puts on us, it is those are the highlights of our days. It's just like seeing Gavin playing with his friends. Get out there and make those friends, and especially if you have MS. They don't need to know all about your MS. Most people in my neighborhood know nothing about my MS other than I have it. But on my really bad days, if Andrew is not available to help take care of Gavin, I can call them up and say, hey, can Gavin come over and play for a little while, just so I can take a breather and deal with my flare-ups. Community is key, and that's support network. That's point number three. Number four here is just adapting activities and embrace flexibility. I think one thing Gavin and I have done well, but there's been bumps along the road. And one thing I would go back and tell myself if I had to do it all over again is get ready to be able to adapt to new activities and embrace the flexibility around those. What activities can we do when my MS is bad? And can I plan around that if it gets worse? Or I'm not going to go into a situation where Gavin and I are going to go on a 4-week camping trip, right? We're not going to go hike Kilimanjaro tomorrow afternoon. That's not realistic. So there's no out with that. If my flare up happens in the middle of the high altitudes of Kilimanjaro, I'm not going to get a rescue helicopter to get Gavin and I out of that. I put us both in danger. So I have to think about activities where I can remain flexible, While I'm speaking about it, we have in the past scheduled trips to Disneyland and canceled those trips to Disneyland because I can't trust this disease to basically put that much money down on something that I may not even be able to participate in. And in fact, at one point, a long time ago, we did go to Disneyland. My MS flared up like crazy, and I basically spent the whole time in the hotel while everybody else was out doing their thing. How could I have been flexible around that? Well, probably not going to Disneyland and dropping that much coin. I think we could have done different things. So think about that. What activities can you plan with your kid that if you have to change on a moment's notice, you can? Probably that trip to Mars right now, not a good idea with MS. Just saying, might want to think that one through. All right, let's talk about point number 5, and this will be the reason that you watch this video for a second time or share it or like it or subscribe and subscribe. I think every parent struggles with this, but it's incredibly important that if you have a chronic disease like multiple sclerosis, that you really listen to this point because it can change everything. And point number 5 is prioritize self-care and advocate for your needs. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself it's okay to step back and take time for myself. Like, I need to eat right. I need to sleep right. I need to work out. I need to do all these things to keep my MS from getting worse. And as a parent, especially a new parent, you put the kids first in every respect. You can't do that with MS. It's detrimental to your health in the long term. You need to figure out a way to prioritize yourself and communicate that to your partner and your community. I would say most of the time, people completely understand that. They will get it, especially if they have a chronic condition. They will understand prioritizing your health is like super, super important, and advocating for your needs is super, super important. So, you need to maintain your MS treatment plan. You don't need to feel guilty about prioritizing your health. One of the main reasons I got a cognitive therapist when I was first diagnosed was basically to deal with the guilt. I wasn't working at that point, which I was a stay-at-home dad, which is a fantastic, awesome job, great opportunity, and I'm glad I did it. But as a 40-year-old male, like my job is to work and bring in the bread. I couldn't do that with MS. So I had a lot of guilt around that, and that was really hard. I had a lot of guilt around taking the rest time that I needed and the relaxation time that I needed to deal with my MS. My wife was working her butt off at her 8 to 5 job, which was more than an 8 to 5 job because she was working at a startup. And then I would have to take like these hour naps because at the time we were living in Texas and it was hot, really hot, and it would just wipe me out. And so she would spend her lunch break watching the kid and doing everything I couldn't do throughout the day. And then when she got off work, she would fill in all the other gaps. I mean, it was like thankless and endless, but it was our reality. And I needed that time to keep my MS at bay. And also, I had to make a list of like advocating my needs to my healthcare providers and telling them what I needed them to provide more than just medication. I needed support. And they're the ones that got me the cognitive therapist. That really helped. But they could connect me with support groups and people that have gone through this. A lot of the people in the support groups are parents as well, and they understand. If you haven't had your children yet, figure out what that self-care schedule looks like. Write it down and be sure to stick to it or at least not massively deviate from it after you have a kid. It's so easy to get caught up in doing nothing but kid things. I'm telling you from experience, it ain't good, and you need to take care of you. So those are my first 5 points about being a parent with multiple sclerosis trying to raise a kid. This is specifically more around being a dad. And so a father's point of view, and everybody is different in their journey with their multiple sclerosis. I was just recently diagnosed when our child was born, but had I had a diagnosis prior to that, there's probably a lot of stuff I would have done different. I just didn't know the disease. I didn't know what it was like to be a parent. I didn't know what it was like to live in Texas. There's a lot of stuff I just didn't know. And of course, that's life. But I'm telling you now that the 5 points that I just gave you will help you in by orders of magnitude if you think them through, because I think these are the 5 points that most people struggle with. and really will make a difference if you can figure them out. And you don't need to know them all right away because everybody's situation is different, but it will definitely assist you greatly if you can get started on them now. I hope this was helpful. My name is Cliff. This is Life with MS, and I'm out. Oh, and a little bonus material. If you've been watching my channel, you would know that in December, my son and I entered a NASA competition to create a rescue vehicle for the next moon mission, Artemis 2, and that was through NASA Tournament Labs. The competition completed, and Gavin and I had a design that we created, did 9 prototypes on, and was accepted by NASA as something they may look at for possible use on the moon. So we were super excited about that. And it just goes to show that just because we have MS doesn't mean we're out. We might be down, but we're not out. And here's one of the coolest things about that project is we designed it with MS in mind. We knew that if we could design it to make it simple enough to use for someone with MS, then an astronaut who's stranded on the moon with a down man or woman next to them could use it too. And the NASA experts saw that and they said, yep, definitely, we're right on point. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. And that's the news for now. I'm Cliff, and I'm out.